All right. Hi, everyone. Hi. It's so nice to see many familiar faces. Thank you for coming inside on a beautiful, beautiful day. So hopefully we'll have a good stretch of these. My name is Michael, and I know many of you. And for those of you that I don't, thank you for coming out. If you would like to have a schedule of mine, I've left them up here at the front. I have one more date here in the fall. The date is on there. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I am here. And then if you want a repeat of this performance later this week, I'm doing it at the Dedham Senior Center Wednesday night this week. So if once isn't enough, because it was just too much for you to fully absorb, and you need a second round to really understand what in the world I was doing, then Wednesday night is your option at 5:30. So anyway, each month I have a new program. And for the month of May, of course, I need to focus on mothers, which brings to grandmothers and great-grandmothers too, and Mother Earth. So I'll weave all of that into a program for you. If you haven't seen me play before, I always combine two pieces of music together, sometimes three, and I do my own arrangements, and then I will share stories throughout so you understand why I have chosen certain pieces. The music today I have put in the order of how a mother becomes a mother. And yes, without getting into too much detail, as I noticed your eyes were starting to be like, this might be interesting. Maybe we will come Wednesday night again. So what I mean is I'll start with how a couple comes together and meets and then progress through the end of life. And so the first stage, and there ended up being 7 chapters to this story. And I thought that was appropriate, right? Because mother's job is 7 days a week, 24/7. So that worked out quite nicely. And as I've shared with you before, it was not my intention to have 7 chapters, but that's what happened. So the chapter number 1, the first song is called Portrait of My Love. Portrait of My Love is not a song that everyone knows. And I've chosen it because my parents, this was their first dance at their wedding. And my father has never asked me to learn a song in my entire life. And I'll be 55 this year. And I've been playing since the age of 6. And my father never asked me to learn a song. And he asked me to learn this song last month when he's now aging and in his early 80s and has had some health issues this year. And I said, of course. So they don't know that I'm performing this in my May program. This program I finish recording later this month, and it will be my 3rd CD, and it will come out next Mother's Day, and it will be dedicated to my mom. The opening song is Portrait of My Love, their wedding dance. When I learned this song last month, I read the lyrics, and the lyrics mention a portrait of a lovely woman, and that's the Mona Lisa. And it also mentions an artist, Michelangelo. And I know it was Da Vinci that did the Mona Lisa, but it was Michelangelo, right? Another artist. And when I brought that attention to my parents, I said, do you know that your 2 children's names are in this song? Michael and my sister is Lisa. And they had no idea. Or did they? Isn't that interesting? It still tells me goosebumps every time I share that story. Their wedding song, it came out in 1965. They fell in love with that song. They were married in 1966, and they chose 2 names of their children. My sister came along in 69 and me in late 70, Lisa and Michael. And they're the names in that song. So it's a very special song. The second song that I play is by Elvis Presley, and I wore Elvis Presley socks today. Pink Elvis Presley socks, $1.25, women's at the dollar store, because you cannot find men's pink Elvis socks. If you find them, pick them up for me, as long as they're only $1.25, and I'll pay you back. The piece is called Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear, and I was thinking of mothers, how they console their child. And even in the womb, they're starting to think about the nursery, and they already may be gathering little stuffed animals to have in there. So this is a portrait of my love, and Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. Chapter 1 in the Book of Motherhood. Thank you very much. So, Portrait of My Love. I know many of you don't know that. The band that the group that my parents really enjoyed, they were called the Lettermen, and I have a couple of their albums that they inherited. My parents had this huge stereo. Maybe some of you knew these too. It was probably the length of these 4 chairs here, like the size of a couch. Yeah, and the record player was inside it, and it had slots for records, and they had these 2 big speakers on the end. They were works of art now, and now you think that what we listen to music on, it's in our pocket. So, but that's what I grew up with, was this huge stereo. So whether I appreciated the Lettermen at that time, I don't recall, but they love that band, and it's a pleasure, or group, and it's a pleasure to play that song for them. So, Portrait of My Love, and Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. So chapter 2 in the Book of Motherhood. Chapter 2, I am going to first play for you another song that is very rare, and I am 99.9% sure that none of you know it, and I'm still going to play it. So the song is considered to be the old, I had alluded to this if any of you saw me last month. I said that I would be playing the oldest song ever discovered on this planet. Yes, it is the oldest fully notated piece of music that was found on a clay tablet. It was found in 1950 in what is now part of Syria, and it was in its full, entire form. Other fragments have been discovered so that they knew that music was a part of ancient life. How old is this song? It's almost 3,500 years old. It is from the year 1400 BC. Isn't that amazing? Yes, sir?
Did they have music notation back then? So how was
Yeah. So it wouldn't have been the scale that we have. Yeah, very different. It was called the Hurrian, Hurrian, hymn number 6. Why in the world could I play it for a Mother's Day program? Because it is a tribute, a song to a goddess. And what is she the goddess of? Fertility. She's the goddess of fertility, and her name was Nikkal, Nikkal. She's also the goddess of fruit trees and orchards and fertility. And isn't that perfect for this time of year, though the storm that we had a couple days ago blew away all of those nice fruit tree blossoms that had come out. But this is a perfect song. Sometimes I find songs and I hold on to them, and then I figure out, how in the world can I integrate this? And this was it. And then the other half of it becomes, well, what do I play it with? And so immediately when I heard this song, I immediately heard another song. And it's called Close to You by Burt Bacharach. Now, that came out in 1963. The melody is pretty darn close. I seriously doubt Burt Bacharach and Hal David had any idea that they were pulling from an uncopyrighted 1400 BC song. But the melody is there, and so it allows me to turn it right into it. And in fact, throughout Close to You, you'll still hear a little bit of the Hurrian hymn, this one melody that I'll start off with. That's how similar they are. It was made famous by the Carpenters in 1970, so much famous by them that many people think Close to You, They Long to Be, which is the whole title, was by the Carpenters. But it was 7 years before Burt Bacharach. I was born in 1970, and so I thought this piece was appropriate because I was very close to my parents, right? So my favorite line from any song, from any poem, from any book is in this piece of music. And here's the line, and for mothers or fathers, you can imagine you are holding a child the first time that you see them, that they are handed to you after birth. And here's the line. Ready? On the day that you were born, the angels got together and decided to create a dream come true. That's it. That is the best line that a mother, and I'm not a mother, and many others could say. When you look at another person, any single person, if you say that line, you will put down any walls between you, because every single person was another's dream at some point, and then they came into being. So, Hurricane hymn number 6 from 1400 BC. I'll play just a single melody with my right hand so you could understand what it sounds like. And it would not have been played on this instrument, of course. I don't know if this opens. It would have been... I can't, it's hard for me to do. I could do it on a grand piano. Or if we laid this down. It would have been played on a 9-stringed lyre. I'm not a liar. L-Y-R-E. Yes. And I'll play it in my right hand, and then I'll add my left hand in it to give it some movement, and then I'll turn it into Close to You. Thank you. So the Hurricane Hymn, number 6 from 1400 BC, and Close to You by Burt Bacharach. Now, chapter 3 in this book of motherhood, I thought of a word that describes something that a mother does, every mother does, and the word is sacrifice. And it's true. Some people, when they first hear that, they say, oh, but it's true. Every mother sacrifices. From the moment that she learns that there is a child growing within her, she sacrifices. She changes what she eats. She changes how she moves. She changes what she does, how she sits, how she walks. And then the list just grows and grows and grows, doesn't it? She sacrifices herself for her child. And I happened to find a piece of music called A Mother's Sacrifice. And it is very rare. Not 1400 BC rare, but still, it's pretty rare, from 1909. What makes it rare is it is the only surviving piece of music from a woman who wrote this. She was an African-American piano teacher in the segregated South, and her name was Lady Viola Kinney. And she probably wrote a lot of music. She certainly had a lot of students, but because of where she lived and who she was, her music wasn't published. And only one piece of music has been found, and the title of it is A Mother's Sacrifice. And I thought that was really beautiful. It has a very simple melody, simple like the Hurricane Hymn that I played for you just now. And I turn it into a piece that is more well-known from 50 years later, and that is made famous by the Everly Brothers, and it's called Let It Be Me, Let It Be Me. And I thought of this piece because when a mother is holding a child and they're looking at one another, connecting through eyes, no words is said, and they're both in gratitude for that being held together, right? Who is luckier, the child or the mother? Neither. It's not a this or that. It's a this and that. And they recognize that. How precious that is. The miracle of life. How that child and that mom are there. Everything that had to happen in life to make that happen. It's very precious. So I play in the Berkshires 3 times a year, and I just got back. I was driving back last weekend, and I looked at the map, and I had a little bit extra time, and I said, I'm going to take the back roads rather than the pike, and you can understand why. If you've driven on the pike, if you're not doing 85 in the slow lane, you're not going fast enough. So I said, I'm going to give myself a gift, and I'm going to take the winding roads along. And of course, it started to downpour, making those roads less enjoyable. 1 week ago Sunday was nothing like yesterday Sunday, if you remember. It rained for like 48 hours straight, almost. So I'm driving along the back roads in this torrential downpours, and I'm driving along, and here I am driving, and as I get up close, I'm reading a sign, and I said to myself, that's a used record store in the middle of nowhere. Like, I drove past it, and then despite the fact that it was torrential downpour, I pulled into somebody's driveway, and thankfully they didn't have a shotgun, and I turned around, and I went back, because you can't pass that up. A used bookstore, record store, in the middle of nowhere. So I pull into the lot, which is like mud season in Vermont, if you've ever been to Vermont, and you know what I mean, because there's so much rain. So I trudge inside, and they have 3 bins of records. And one of the records that I pull out is the Everly Brothers, Let It Be Me. And so I bought it for $6.50. And I love that, because that is just an example of being in the present moment and taking time for a little magic that comes into your life, like what mothers do with their children. You take time. If something is presented like that, you have to investigate it. And that's what mothers do with their kids. Take the time to investigate their curiosity. Mother sacrifice and Let It Be Me. Thank you very much. A mother's sacrifice. That is something that every mother does. And the next is the fourth chapter in this book of motherhood. If you're wondering what I'm always clipping pages up because they like to fall down on me. I thought of when a mother is with her child and she is growing her child like you would tend a garden. And there are certain things that a garden needs, and a child needs the same thing. Because if you roll us back in evolution, we were once that, right? And we need the same things. We need food and water and nutrients, and a mother provides that. Mother then goes on to till and tender that garden and provides other nourishment through words and wisdom and guidance. But the most important thing is something that we also still need, like the plants need, is the sun. And a interpretation of the light that we receive is simply love. We are receiving that love, and that is what a child needs most. They need to feel that love, and they feel that love especially with touch and holding. So this first song that I'll play, you're all going to know, and it is What a Wonderful World, because it speaks to the gardens. I see trees of green, and we see trees of green. I don't know if there's red roses too out there, right? I see red roses too. I see them bloom for me, and I see them bloom for you. And isn't that what a mother wants? A mother has bloomed herself into her own being, and as she grows this child, they start to grow, and then they're blooming themselves, and that's what a mother wants. So the second song that I turn that into is about the sunshine, and I have two sunshine songs. One is Stevie Wonder's You Are the Sunshine of My Life, and that is a beautiful song. And then the third piece is the second sunshine song, and this is the one that all of you have sung to little ones, and that's You Are My Sunshine. So feel free when I get to that one to join in with me. That is fine for you to do. And in fact, join in anytime you want. But remember, you are on TV, so be cautious. This is What a Wonderful World. There's that other line in this too. Let's see. Oh, they will learn much more than I will ever know. And that's a goal of mothers too, right? To not only impart 100% of who they are, but then know that their child will take it one step further. And so it's that progression. So, what a wonderful world. You are the sunshine of my life, and you are my sunshine. All right. I'm glad you came in on time. That's recorded for in perpetuity. I like the way that that song ends because it's a good segue into the next piece. Don't take my sunshine away. And the sunshine will be there, of course, but it might not always be in your backyard. And that is what the next set of pieces represent. And I ask that you pull into your mind an image of a loved one's wedding. And if you have children of your own that have reached that stage in life, that is the image that you have in your mind. Or a niece or a nephew, someone close, the image of a wedding. Because now that marks the occasion when they are definitely leaving you from a point, right? So the song is The Way You Look Tonight, a beautiful piece of music. It is a very common first dance piece, not just between the newlyweds, but it is oftentimes mother and son, or father and a daughter, to have that first dance. And it's not the last dance, but that is a giving away, right? You're giving them away. And that is a precious time. And so people have these memories of weddings, not only in their mind, but because they paid a photographer thousands of dollars to come out and mark the event. And you have those pictures in a binder somewhere. Yes, but maybe you have one of them that you have kept out, but there are hundreds of them somewhere. But you have that picture, and so you can look back and you can see the way that you looked that night. And thinking of mothers there, the bride has her flowers, and the mother has her flowers, and the bridesmaid have their flowers, and the groomsmen have their corsages. There's a lot of flower, and the flower, she's depositing petals along the way. So flowers play an important part, and of course for the month of May. And so the second piece is called Fragrant Fields, and it is one of my favorite George Winston pieces. And I've mentioned George Winston to you before. He used to come to this area, he would come to Massachusetts typically twice a year, and one was in Natick. And I was supposed to go see him 2 years ago, and then he passed away a month before. I had seen him about 12 times beforehand, and my parents took me to see him in Baltimore, Maryland, when I was about 13 or 14. And he is the musician that has had the most influence on my life in terms of the way that I play. And so, regardless of what you might think of my playing, you could say it's unique. And that uniqueness is an adaptation of the way that George Winston plays. And some people who have heard me play come up to me, and because not everybody knows George Winston, but the highest compliment that anyone ever pays to me is when they say, "You sound like George Winston." And people have said that in some ways. And I am very, very flattered, though he was beyond what I could do. He didn't even start playing the piano until his 20s. Many people don't realize that. And he was so unpretentious at his ability. I truly think that he really was a prodigy, because he plays like no one else. And yet, he didn't even start playing the piano until his 20s. Most people that are concert pianists are starting when they're 4, 5, or 6. And if you ever saw him play, he would walk up on stage, and you would think to yourself, what is that guy doing on stage? We're waiting for George Winston. Why is he up there? He'd be in jeans and a flannel shirt, and he didn't have shoes on. Yeah, you would think that he was a janitor. I'm not kidding you. So for the first time, if any of you have ever saw him, that is what you would have thought. You know, you're waiting, and this random guy just walks up on stage. He looks like he's going to dust the floor, or maybe he's tuning the piano. And he sits down at the piano, and then you are in absolute awe of what he is able to do with that instrument. And the thing that he does is what people say about my piano playing. They say, Michael, you don't play chords. And I don't play chords. Chords are static. My left hand is always moving, and that creates movement and flow, and that's what people feel is movement. And I learned that from George Winston. So I'm going to play Fragrant Fields and thinking of fragrant flowers. And yesterday at the Arnold Arboretum in Boston is known as Lilac Sunday, which is why I wore my lilac shirt. And I always joke with people, do not go on Lilac Sunday to Arnold Arboretum because the lilacs have been open for a little bit of time and they'll remain open. But if you go then, you're going to be there with 9,999 other people, and maybe even more than that, especially yesterday. So this is a wedding in your mind with beautiful flowers and feeling the breathing of these two pieces. And when I mean that, they breathe. They breathe together. And that's what we do at weddings, breathing in love together. Thank you very much. The way you look tonight and fragrant fields, that was chapter 5 in the book of motherhood. So chapter 6 is the empty nest, because now they're married off, and was just chatting with Norma about what happens in an empty nest. So the first piece is the name of the state flower of Massachusetts, which is... No, I heard it. Mayflower, yes. Many people don't know that, and that's okay. The Mayflower. Everybody knows the ship. Well, the Mayflower, the flower, is the reason they named the ship, the Mayflower. In 1620, it was one of 22 other boats that had been named the Mayflower in England during that time period. It was a popular name. Why would you name a ship the Mayflower? What does the Mayflower symbolize? New beginnings and hope. Now you understand why this piece marks the stage of an empty nest. It is the stage of new beginnings for you and your children, and hope for them and you too. And that is a beautiful imagery. The piece that I play was written by Beverly McKiver. She's Canadian, which means she didn't write it for Massachusetts. She wrote it for the province of Nova Scotia, and their province flower is the Mayflower. And she wrote it just about 5 years ago. She wrote a piece of music with the name of a flower and the name of a person. And Norma, I'm calling you out on this, because she named this for Norma. And Norma and I were just having a conversation about what happens when you have an empty nest. And the third chapter in this book was one of sacrifice. And if you were a mother that sacrifices, you give up things. And it might be travel. It might be a hobby of yours. And so a new beginning is marked when children are now, you've sent them off and they're on their own. Doesn't mean you're not going to mother them for the rest of your life, but you do have more time. And then grandkids come along and they take some time, but then eventually they'll go. And so it is this chapter of new beginnings. So the second piece is 1896, Another Flower to a Wild Rose. Edvard MacDowell and his wife Miriam lived in Massachusetts, and he wrote this in 1896, and I learned from my mom recently that I played this in a recital when I was like 12 or 13, and I had no idea. And that was probably because they were traumatic events for me when I was a child, and you tend to block out those things. Yes, me, I was terrified of performing in front of people, let alone having to speak and perform. And look at me now. Can't shut me up. So, To a Wild Rose, Miriam and MacDowell could not have children. So I also used this set of pieces to draw attention to women who mother in other ways besides a human. And that could be mothering as an aunt. An aunt, sorry. Not a creature that crawls on the ground. We are creatures that crawl on the ground, but not an aunt and aunt. Sorry, that's my Baltimore lingo. You could mother a garden. You could mother a book. You could mother a painting. These are things that you mother. And in the case of Edvard MacDowell and Miriam, they mothered his music. And they continued to mother his music because she opened up a colony in New Hampshire called the MacDowell Colony that still exists to this day. And artists of any variety can go there free of charge to stay and practice their craft. Now that is a legacy that you leave behind, like you do with children. So, the Mayflower and To a Wild Rose. Thank you very much. I would like to just be able to go 5 minutes over, if that's okay, so I can play the seventh chapter in this book, because motherhood, 7 days a week, right? 24 hours a day. So I ended up with 7 chapters, and I think most people really enjoy these pieces of music, but I understand if you have somewhere to go exactly at 1:30 or 2:30, then here's your exit. Get out of here. For those of you that are staying, thank you so much. The last chapter is to remember mothers that are no longer with us. And I have 3 pieces. They are here in our hearts and our minds, of course, just not physically. The first piece is Alleluia. Leonard Cohen, and he wrote this, apparently it took him about 5 years, and there are so many verses to it that people pick and choose their favorite verses. Yes. And the verses, I think they pick and choose them depending on the event. And I have seen this played everywhere from a wedding to a funeral and everything in between. High School Musical, talent shows is a very popular song to sing on talent shows. Andre Bocelli, yes, and Celine Dion, maybe, or no, somebody else. So I was playing, and an Italian woman, she was like 90, came up to me, and she showed me on her phone. I was like, wow, that they did a beautiful version of this. How is it that one song can be played at a wedding and a funeral? That's a very special song. How is that possible? And I think it's because it has nothing to do with the lyrics that speaks to people. It has to do with the music. And remember, music is the soul's own speech. The soul doesn't speak in words. It speaks in music, in beauty. And I think that's why this is a simply beautiful piece of music. And so it speaks to us, no matter what occasion we're in. It speaks to us emotionally. The second piece is Let It Be, Paul McCartney. A famous line, in my hour of darkness, Mother Mary comes to me. And many people interpreted that as Mother Mary, if you're Christian. And it has to do with his mother, whose name was Mary, and she died when he was 14 years old. And so I thought about this because think about losing, I still have my mother in my life now, and losing her at 14, I can't imagine, right? The things that were said and unsaid, and the things that were said that you can't take back, and the things that were unsaid that you wanted to hear and you won't get. That's what this song is about. Let it be. That is a powerful song that each of us can take, not only for a mother, but for any person that we have lost in our lives. Let it be. That is the only way that we can come to peace and finish living out our life. The third piece is a beautiful love song by Bette Midler called The Rose. And the rose is oftentimes in mystical language, even in Christian mysticism, the Mother Mary, which is what many interpreted from Let It Be, Mother Mary is seen as a rose, a rose. And I thought that was appropriate too for Mother's Day when roses are given out. So this is Alleluia, let it be, and the rose. And the way it works is Alleluia, let it be, Alleluia, let it be, the rose, let it be. They all use similar chords. Here we go. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing your smiling faces and your joy into the room along with me and celebrating mothers. I'll be back in October, October, and I'll be bringing a fall program. And until then, I have a calendar of other events that are at other senior centers and libraries. And I look forward to seeing all of you again. Thank you for continuing to support me. I really appreciate it. It's a blessing to play for you. Thank you.